Let's do this.
Hey, I'm Becca. I'm the office director here. I'm the one you've been emailing with. And then this is Steve. He's our CEO.
Morning, I think. Yep.
Nice to meet you.
So yeah, why don't you guys tell us a little bit more about the class that you're taking, just the end goal for this, just a little bit about yourselves.
Okay. I'll go. Okay, my name's Owen Swan. I'm a senior here. I'm a finance major at Spring Arbor. And so first speech, we've been given this project. And so our overall, I guess, strategy for us is we're looking at homelessness. So we've been given as if we have 100 consecutive years. And so our idea is how we are going to pitch to city council to use this money. And so we're trying to research within the Jackson community and homelessness as a whole in terms of finding out the best way to go about finding a solution for homelessness with the money.
Oh, that's cool. That's very practical.
Great. Well, I know a few of you had sent in some questions, so I printed those off for Steve, and we'll go through those. And then if there's time, I think we've got about an hour. So if there's more time and there's other questions, we can talk about those too. But yeah.
All right. So you want me to just put on the list?
Let's go on the list.
All right. First one was, who am I?
I have this one.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
You go.
Well, no, I put this one on here just to have you share a little bit about yourself, role at the shelter, any history you want to share.
You're answering that, or I'm answering?
You're answering.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Steve, CEO here at the shelter. I've been here about 2.5 years. I started working here. I actually was at Spring Arbor University for 10 years. So I went to Spring Arbor. I did my undergrad and master's there. Was a school teacher originally, did some other work before starting to work at the college. And then, was there about 10 years in various roles and kind of started thinking about looking at some other opportunities and really just mission oriented. I really care about doing work that matters. So as I started putting feelers out there, I came across the CEO role here at the shelter and kind of looking at the job description, just the very practical ministry where you're hands-on, you're investing in people that are in a pretty tough situation in life. You're creating opportunities, not just to meet immediate needs, but set the stage to set them up for success so that ideally they never are homeless again. One of those places that you're a siren.
Here.
Easily distracted. So it's a neat role. I care about the Jackson community, and so it's just a neat way to kind of pull together different experiences in a way that can hopefully make a difference in people's lives. So that's how I ended up coming over to work here. It's been a great time here. I've really appreciated the work. It's very meaningful. About 7 months into the role is when COVID started, so that was a big pain in the rear. At first, it was pretty scary because we had about 60 people living here together, and they're saying, people need to shelter in place and all that kind of stuff. We're like, well, where do people go that have nowhere to go? And so we figured it out. We navigated. We put in a lot of hours. And it's been a crazy 1.5 years, but despite, just trying to always pivot and make sure that we're keeping people safe, we're updating the facilities, we're enhancing programming, we're bringing new team members on. So trying to not just hit pause and do the basics, but, still use these opportunities, even during crappy times, to say, how do we keep enhancing the care that we provide to people and go beyond just meeting the very basics of here's a bed, here's some food, be happy for it. But instead, to come alongside and enhance the dignity and respect that people feel while they're going through a tough stage in life.
So I'll just read the questions.
I like that. Okay.
So what have you seen people try to do to solve homelessness that hasn't worked? And what have you seen, or what do you believe is the solution?
Yeah. So part of the interesting thing, so we actually had a lunch meeting yesterday. It was actually kind of funny. It was somebody that's a director at United Way, somebody that's worked here at the shelter for 20 years, and then somebody that's actually started a kind of urban farming thing in Jackson called Grow Jackson. So we grabbed lunch at Dirty Bird downtown, and we have different philosophies on things, and we're probably different on the political spectrum. But we had a lunch and we just said, hey, let's read this article together and discuss it because it talks about homelessness and different philosophies on drug programs and all that kind of stuff. And let's agree that we actually all care about the issue a lot. And even if we don't land on the same solution, we need to partner together. So it's kind of interesting, and like, oh, that's so great, we can do that, because everybody just fights about everything nowadays and yells at each other and demonizes each other. So partly it gets tricky because the idea of solving homelessness, like 100% means, so every individual is different. So to say, how do you solve kids not graduating from high school? There's 1,000 different issues and reasons, whether it's broken home or hunger or parent dies of a disease or a really crappy school system that's dangerous. So they're scared they'll get shot if they go to school. So, so a lot of times we want to, what's the quick fix to fix 1,000 issues that are historic, and every individual is a different type of person that has different needs. So part of the approach in general, if you're working with humans, you have to understand people have autonomy, and this solution that works for this person, or the thing that works in the UP of Michigan, might not be the solution for New York City, because they're very, very different places. So my personal perspective is, the more you kind of localize solutions with the people that are on the ground, that are from the community, that care about the community, instead of, this is a job and I'm just getting paid a lot and I'm going to move somewhere else soon anyway because I'm working some ladder. They don't have a vested interest in what happens in the community either way. So with things that don't work, I think a lot of it's one size fits all solutions. Don't typically work, in my opinion. I think so like being a Christian myself, and believing that we're inherently made in a way that helps us thrive in certain ways. So I think living consistently in certain ways, having healthy families, treating people well, not being selfish, following the golden rule, all that kind of stuff, I think actually helps people to thrive. And I think when you're thriving in different ways, homelessness ties into that, because a lot of times the people we see here, some, there's just life throws you a curveball and crap happens and you need a place for a month or two to get back on your feet. Other people, it's for 50 years, it's generational, they're cycling through. So really it's a lot of that. There's brokenness, there's habits, there's decisions, there's broken families, and all of these layers and layers of things that need to be addressed. So yeah, just saying, get somebody in a home and then they're fixed. They won't be in that home in a month, because if you're still cooking meth, you're going to blow up the home doesn't exist anymore. So now you're homeless again. Just to give a very broad example, but that is a realistic example too. So yeah, I don't think some of those things work. What I do think works is, working with the individual, getting to know people, allowing people to sometimes feel the consequences of their actions, because I think a lot of times that can be the best teacher, and not in a way where it's, hey, you made a bad choice, so now you need to freeze to death outside, because now that doesn't give you a chance to fix it anyway. But to say, yeah, like, it's going to be, here's some hurdles to overcome because of this and this, but we're going to come alongside and work with you, rather than just, no matter what you do, trying to just fix it for you, because people need to have that autonomy. They need to have some skin in the game, so that they can move forward, because then you keep taking the training wheels off a little bit more. But sometimes you skin your knee once or twice as you're doing that process, and that's okay, So, yeah, so I think, working with individuals, knowing that it's, and a lot of it is knowing it's a process. I think, again, like, there's a funding stream for 2 years, and they want to fix homelessness within 2 years, because that's when the grant runs out. And it's like, this is going to be a 30-year process. If for 80 years, your mom, your dad, your grandma, your grandpa, every aunt and uncle had this, you can't just fix that overnight. So having the long-term approach, celebrating little wins. If somebody gets sober for 50 days and then they fall off the wagon, that's great. They were sober for 50 days. Let's work towards 51 days and not see the fact that they fall off the wagon and didn't solve every issue the first time as a failure. Like, you got to celebrate the little successes as well. So anyways.
Yeah. What services already exist to help people, and how does someone go about finding those services?
Yeah, so there are tons and tons of services. I'm still trying to figure out half of what exists. Even I'm in it every day, and it's like, there's a new random nonprofit that'll open every other day. So yeah, so there's layers of services. There's, a mix of federal dollars, state dollars that have organizations. So like community mental health, like Lifeways, probably 50+% of the people we see here at the shelter have some sort of mental health, either whether it's diagnosed or undiagnosed. And so that's a huge, part of, a lot of the solution with poverty too. You have to address some of these things. So yeah, there's lots of food things. There's Section 8 housing. So if you kind of fit the parameters on this, you can get signed up for permanent supportive housing. If you're a veteran, there's all these extra layers of things that are there to support you. If you're a single parent, under a certain amount of income, there's lots of layers of things for food support, housing support, free laptops at schools, all this kind of stuff. So there's layers and layers. There's churches on every corner. A ton of them have feeding programs, different types of things. A lot of places will like do utility help. And so somebody says, my power is going to be shut off. I have no money. And so they'll say, okay, we'll cover the next 2 months of utilities for you. Places like United Way, that most communities have those. So they oversee the 211, which is like the social services version of 911. So you can call and say, I'm homeless, help. And ideally they let you know, here's the 60 other organizations that do this. So they help to connect you with one, whether it's utility assistance, you're homeless, you're hungry, you need a wheelchair, whatever it is, they help to create a little bit of guidance on what direction to go. Yeah.
About TTI.
Yeah. And then as far as street homelessness, so there's an organization called Training and Treatment Innovations here in Jackson. It's TTI. They do a lot with mental health stuff, but their staff, they physically go under the bridges and on the streets. And if somebody's homeless, they'll go talk to them and say, how can I support you? Have you been connected to these resources? Do you have food? Do you know that Interfaith shelter exists? Can I bring you over there if you want to not be on the street anymore? And so they directly are hands-on with people on the street that then kind of move them towards other resources if the people want other resources. So there's a few, but it's lots and lots and lots. And I think partly with the previous question about what's the solution, I think some of it's partnering better together. And then some of them, and I feel like maybe we need 30% fewer organizations so that we're not reinventing the wheel every other day. Yeah, because a lot of times it's even funny, like lots of people that have never even volunteered here once, and they'll say, I want to open a homeless shelter. And I'm like, why don't you come volunteer once, or why don't you apply and join our team, kind of thing. But it's this interesting idea of wanting to run a place where that's just 99% of the work and effort, not actually working with people. So it's like, if you want to build wells in Africa, like partner with an organization already doing it rather than starting your own, and so, but I think a lot of us, have this innate thing where they just want to start their own thing. So, but I think that minimizes solutions from happening because you got 50 people kind of, competing or not collaborating or fighting over the same dollars and stuff like that.
What does a day in the life look like for someone who's homeless?
So day in the life for someone homeless would, again, depend. Everybody's story is different. So if it's, some people, they have a really thorough support network. So maybe you go and stay with family and you've got people that live in Jackson that you can live with, but you need permanent housing that's not a bunch of people doubling up together, but you at least have the support network. Mm-hmm. Other people, they have no family from here, or they were an only child and all of their family's dead and they have nobody, they're not connected to a church. And so they're kind of loners. And, some people, if there's a severe mental illness, their existence is, thinking that the CIA is after me and, living in this alternate reality. So some on that kind of extreme mental illness spectrum, are kind of almost like a bipolar state and things like that. So it's just a mix, but I think in general, there's a lot of health outcomes that are a lot more difficult when you're homeless because, as you know, like when you're under stress, like our bodies aren't made to be in a fight or flight state all the time. It's more for an emergency. So if you're in fight or flight all the time, it's terrible for your heart. There's always stress. If you're not sleeping is super important for your own health. So especially if you're on the street, sleeping an hour a day for an extended period of time, you're you're going to die 10 years earlier just because your health is terrible. You're going to get other types of infections. You're not going to get the dental health you need. So then bad oral hygiene affects all other type of health things. So, you know, in general, homeless folks, you know, kind of the stereotypical thing, especially if you're on the street, there's just so many other health factors, relational factors, and just safety factors. You know, there's certain places that if you're sleeping on the streets, you could be taken advantage of, and whether it's physical harm or, you know, yeah, just other things like that. So it's consistent state of stress, being ostracized from society. So it's a host of things.
What's the general age group and demographic of homelessness in Jackson?
We have a huge mix of the demographics, and so that was something that kind of surprised me when I started, because I think a lot of times there's just these stereotypes of who's homeless. But right now we have a 1-week-old baby here at the shelter. So the mom came in, she was six months pregnant. They kept pushing her due date back because she almost went in labor like 100 different times, and she had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old here with her. So we've got this mom that's 28 with a 2, 4, and 1-week-old baby here at the shelter right now. We got folks in their 70s and 80s. When I first started, and when COVID started, there was a 85-year-old handicapped guy that was here, and there was a lady that was currently at the hospital having a baby. So we had a 1-day-old up to an 85-year-old. So it's a huge mix of men, women, kids of all ages that we serve here.
What have you seen as the biggest reason that people end up on the streets?
Yeah, for end up on the streets, to me, a lot of what I see, it's broken relationship. And for, I don't know what your guys' own situations are, but, you know, for me, I'm blessed to where if I lost my house or something happened, whether it catches on fire or I made a bunch of stupid financial decisions and lost my house, I would have 60 layers of people that would let me live with them, whether it's my brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, mom, dad, dozens of families in my church, colleagues here at work, whatever, that would say, hey, you know, we got a spare room or a couch, and let me know what you need. So a lot of it, either if there's no relationships because your family was tiny, or you moved here and you have no relationships here, or you burn a lot of bridges because the scenario I just said, if I'm staying with people, but then I'm using drugs in their home, if I'm damaging things, if I'm, you know, just a lot of things are going on, at some point I would end up burning that bridge, and somebody would have to say, hey, we love you, Steve, but you can't be here anymore because you're putting my kids in danger, you know, kind of thing. And so a lot of folks have done that. They've burnt every relationships, and, you know, their parents will reach out and they're in tears because they want to help them, but they, for 5 years, tried to let them stay, and then it's dangerous, and there's mental health issues and all that. So yeah, a lot of it's broken relationships, mental health issues and things like that get you to the point of being on the streets and having nowhere to be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you hit on the generational homelessness too. Like sometimes it just cycles through generations.
Yep.
It's hard to get out of that.
Yeah, with generational poverty, you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know if you guys have read, there's an author by the name of Ruby Pine. It's either Payne or Pine, and she writes like Bridges Out of Poverty, Understanding Poverty, a Cognitive Approach. So she's a PhD. I think education is her main background, but ties in a lot of sociology and psychology. But, you know, kind of looks at, she's got these 3 columns. Okay, if you're kind of poverty, lower class, whatever, middle class to upper class, like here's how you interact with relationships. Here's your idea of food. Here's your idea of this. And it kind of is like, okay, a poor person, it's, do I have enough food? A middle class person, it's, is it good quality food? And like an upper class person, is the presentation really beautiful? So when I have company, it's my cutlery's in the right place and my cheese looks like a swan or something stupid, you know, but it's like just a very, very different approach. And then where like a poor person, it'd be like, what days do restaurants put out their day old bread so I know where to get free stuff? And where like I would be like, I don't know, because I would be in the middle class section. And then, you know, for upper class, it's where do you go for the, you know, where do you go to learn about the best deals on buying a yacht? You know, things like that. And I'm like, I would not know that either, you know, because that's not my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. So it kind of shows, you know, so if you're generational poverty, you don't know how do you function in middle class society, because just the normal things that we know, finish high school, if you don't have enough money for college, community colleges, they're super cheap, there's scholarship opportunities, and just these basic things that you kind of go through that stream. If 0 people in your family have ever done that, if it's just super abnormal to ever have marriages last, so if no aunts, uncles, mom, dad, anybody have ever had a marriage that has lasted, you just either never get married or you just think, oh, I assume that I'll be married 6 times, but then that's going to do a lot to those kids that you have. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of pieces that with generational poverty, you're not learning the normal things that help you to function well in today's society.
If you had $1 million annually for 3 years to help solve homelessness in Jackson, how would you use it and what would it solve?
I would have very specifically identified situations with people and then little like buy-ins that they had to do for things. So basically like whatever they could contribute, whether that's $5, whether that's helping to physically help with the project, whatever, things that would say, once you've done this piece, we're gonna give you this money to buy this, or once you've completed this training, we're gonna pay for this so that you can have the car. If you can only spend $20 towards getting a driver's license, we'll pay for the rest, but you need to at least chip in the $20. And those that want to do that, so then it'd be identifying the things that's okay, if you've never had a license and now the reason you keep losing your job is because if the bus route changes, now you can't get to work. Well, then getting a car will solve 90% of these issues. And for $300, you can now make an extra 30 grand a year for the rest of your life because you're doing this. So really kind of dig in and identify those situations. With that money, I would hire the best and the brightest people that are super ethical and that care deeply about people, and then it's not just a job. I found in social services, for most people, it seems like it's just a job. And so I check things off the list. I have my conversations, but the ability to think outside the box, the ability to question the narrative is not there for most. And I think it's just kind of been bred into the system. So I think if it's undesignated dollars, you could use it however you want. And so that's the way I'd use it. And those are the things that I found over my years, both internationally and domestically doing service work. It's exponentially helped people more. And then once you stop helping, they don't need you anymore because they've actually learned the skills and processes to keep doing it themselves. And their hope and their pride and all that kind of stuff in themselves goes up exponentially because they know I didn't just sit here and people just did this for me. They helped me. I'm appreciative, but I did this work and now I can train other people how to do it and tell them, I understand where you're at. I was there too. Here's the process to do it. So yeah, that's how I'd use it.
Yeah. How can society or our local community help reduce homelessness?
Yeah, so it's kind of similar stuff. It's seeing what's the actual need. Some of it are there enough homes? So if it's we need more housing, that's a piece of it. And so what's the process? And now there's all this federal money coming. So Jackson's getting $60 million, 30 million for the city and 30 million for the county. So if you strategically made houses, whether that's partnering with Habitat for Humanity, with for-profit contractors, because that's good for them. They're making more money. They're paying into the tax system, but they're also creating homes. And then they create some blueprint that's making good quality homes that are going to appreciate in value, but they can be made quickly and, for a decent price. That's definitely a piece of it. But then the process of helping people to know, how do you get a mortgage? How do you pay your mortgage? How do you make sure you can keep a job? Because you can't just say, here's 20 houses, they're free. And then everybody loses those homes. They were worth 200 grand. Now they're worth 100 grand because holes were kicked in every wall, kind of thing. So you have to make sure that process happens so that people stay in the homes and that it can appreciate so they can pass that generational wealth on to their kids as well. So more homes, mental health stuff, people partnering together well, funneling resources in a consistent way rather than putting tons of dollars at Band-Aid fixes that sometimes make the problem worse.
What are some typical stereotypes that aren't true about homelessness?
Yeah. For that one, it depends on what angle you come from, because if you if you think everybody's a bum that just needs to work harder, that's not necessarily true. Or if you think everybody's working their butts off and they're just a victim, that's also not true. So there's a lot of people that I've found as a society, we're creating a lot of victimization for people, and we're almost saying like you can't do stuff or you shouldn't do stuff, or having a job is a bad thing. And so they almost see like it's demeaning to have a job, but getting free housing and food and never having a job is actually like the good life. But then they're depressed because they're not active, they're not breathing fresh air, they're not going outside, they're not creating community. So there's a mix where some of the I mean, all stereotypes are usually, there's at least a nugget of truth because that stereotype came for a reason, even if it's very few people, lined up with that. But so yeah, to me, there's no perfect stereotype because, a quick example I'll give. So there's a gal that, so she's here, single mom, 2-year-old, 4-year-old baby, no husband, no guy in her life kind of thing. So has a certain set of ways to help her, meets maybe certain stereotypes of homelessness. And then another gal we served, she just finished up her master's degree from the University of Michigan. She's going to be working with the United Nations. She's from Bangladesh. And because of COVID, she could not get a flight home. So when she graduated from her program, the shelters in Ann Arbor were full. And so she had nowhere to be. She ended up in Jackson, and she stayed with us for about 3 months. And then when things opened up, we were able to get her a bus ticket to Detroit, and she was finally able to get reunited with her family in Bangladesh. But that's a very different, situation where she's probably going to be working with the United Nations in January and already had a job lined up, and so there's no great stereotypes in the way that we serve her. She has way different needs. If anything, for the few months she was here, she was just super helpful, almost was like a staff member and helped in the kitchen a lot, and she enjoyed doing it, so she was just, a totally different set of things. So yeah, there's no set stereotypes that would be true, but most of them have some nugget of truth. And to me, the mental health thing, if people think mental health issues are part of homelessness, I would say that stereotype is becoming more and more true. And so solving homelessness, does need to really address, or at least acknowledge that those factors are in play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The last one I have on here, we've probably already hit on most of this, but why is homelessness happening in our community, and how many people are suffering from this in the Jackson community?
Yeah. So in our community, it's kind of the mix, like I shared. When we were started almost 50 years ago, Jackson Interfaith Shelter. So in 3 years will be our 50-year anniversary. And it was originally started because a lady by the name of Bev Garges, she passed away about 1.5 years ago. She saw there were these alcoholic guys that were on the streets in Jackson in the 70s, and she was a Catholic lady. It broke her heart, so she got to be friends with these guys, and she'd bring them sandwiches and go under the bridge and hang out and stuff. And then one winter, one of the guys she'd been getting to know and invest in froze to death on the streets. And so that's how she started the shelter. She thought, we at least need a place where these guys can get out of the cold. Like, how in the world can we let people freeze to death in our own city? And so the shelter we're at now, we've been here about 45 years, but the original shelter was about a mile east of here. Is just a small little storefront, and they had space for about 10 guys, and they could come in, get some soup, and get out of the cold. And then now it's expanded to, we have 76 beds for men, women, children. We serve everybody. So at that time in the 70s, it was a lot of alcoholism, and now it's, broken relationships. I mean, this past year, there's 100,000 deaths in the U.S. from opioid overdoses. I mean, so now, obviously, alcoholism's a huge thing, but when they overprescribed all the opioids, and then people get on heroin, and now there's fentanyl, and that's so much more dangerous. And so that's a huge one now that, not only while you're high and stuff, it's not possible to be overly productive, but also it's changing the chemistry of your brain. So even if you get clean, there's going to be lifelong effects. And if you're pregnant while you're using this crap, you're setting your kids up where they'll probably never have full brain function their whole life. So in our own community, those are definitely factors that come into play. And that's, nationally, those are similar trends that a lot of places are seeing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we serve just over 700 people every year.
Yeah.
And we serve over 60,000 meals each year. That's both to our clients and the community. We provide 3 fresh prepared meals every day that folks can come and get. Used to be people would have to come inside, or they'd be able to come inside, sit at the tables, enjoy a meal. With COVID, we've had to switch to go meals just to, reduce the number of people that are inside the building. But that's a little bit about how we serve too.
Yeah, and sometimes people, they're here for a little bit, able to get stabilized. You never see them again until they sign up to come be volunteers and all that stuff, which is awesome. And then other people, our cook who's about to retire, he's been here 30 years. He actually stayed at the shelter about 35 years ago. His wife was homeless as well. She's worked here for 20 years. But so they've been here so long that some of them, they're like, yep, this person, every single year they've come back for the last 20 years. Their mom used to come here every year. I knew their grandma. And so some of them, it's, that cycle as well, where you do as much as you can to help, but then no matter how much you stabilize, once they go, if they do or don't kind of keep using those tools, you might see them again. And it's that weird thing too, because you get connected with people here a lot. So it's always that funny feeling when somebody leaves, you're like, yay, you're leaving the shelter, but you're also like, oh, I really like you, and so it's, I guess, a high school teacher, they would hate if all of their kids failed, but also like you're probably sad every year to see kids that you really enjoy moving on, kind of thing. So it's an interesting, type of work. You're like, please never come back, but I really like you. I hope I see you again sometime, Yeah.
So yeah, those were the questions that we had compiled. If we missed any, or if you guys have other questions, we still have some time if you want to shoot those out.
Yeah. That information. One question I have, if you could just go over the process of you find on the streets, they want to come to the shelter. What is the process? So what do you do as soon as they get to the shelter?
Yeah, so for us, we're a low barrier shelter, which means any and everybody's welcome. We don't do background checks or anything like that. You could come in high out of your mind or drunk, as long as you're not using on the premises. You're welcome. The only one thing we do check is for criminal sexual conduct, because we have kids that stay here. So if you have pedophilia or something in your past, that's the one thing that would bar you. Which even with that, there's a thing where if it's been 30 years and the case was thrown, all that kind of stuff, we could still use discretion. But obviously, we want to make sure kids are safe while they're here. But yeah, so you come. Ideally, somebody calls ahead of time just to double check. But obviously, some people don't have phones, so they could just show up on our doorstep. And if we got space, which typically we do, we start the check-in process. And with that, it's basically you kind of say, because ideally being an emergency shelter, if they have anywhere else to be, you want them not to be here, because you want them to be in a home. You want them to be in a long-term place. And so, you want some sort of diversion to where, not where you're saying, hey, can you be somewhere else? But like you kindly, ask questions. Where were you at last night? And if it was, I was at my mom and dad's, it's like, oh, okay. So what happened? And then, was there a fight? Is there a way that we could help to, intervene and call and advocate on your behalf? But then if there's nowhere else to be and they just need to be here for the season, then kind of no questions asked. We can go through the check-in process, let them know how stuff works. And yeah, they get a bed and we kind of work a process for how long they need to be here and things like that.
We want to make sure they've got clothing. Sometimes they'll just come with clothing on their backs. So we have a partnership with St. Vincent de Paul where we can give them a voucher and they can go and shop for clothes that they need free of charge, no questions asked. Sure. Anything they do bring with them, we wash it, make sure it's clean, all of that. So we want to make sure they're, not bringing in hordes and hordes of stuff. We don't have storage for, bags and bags of things, but if they come with nothing, we want to make sure they've got what they need.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. So one question is, what is your biggest hurdle when dealing with people who come back again and again? Like, what is the hardest thing to deal with? Because you guys provide a living space.
With that, there'd be a couple of things coming to mind. Like for some, if they're back again and back again because maybe they had to be removed because they were unsafe or bringing drugs into the building or things like that. that becomes hard because you want to keep serving people, but you can't put everybody else in danger. You can't have a heroin needle laying around where a kid can poke themselves and things like that. So that's a different level where it's like some, there's the very small fraction of people that just are so extreme that you almost can't help because they can't not put themselves or others in danger. So that's one piece of, the hard piece. For others, it's sad because you want to see them move forward, but people are autonomous beings, so you can't, control what they do when they leave. So part of that, and I don't know if I'm addressing your question well, but it's adjusting your mindset, because I think partly as college educated Western Americans that think we're super smart, like you always want to fix everything. And so I want to fix that person. And at some point you have to say, hey, I'm going to love them as they are. I would love to see them move forward, but they've got major cognitive issues or this and that, or no support network. And so, we're a place that also for some of those people that just, the scripture, the poor will always be among you. You don't use that as a reason, let's not help people. So you don't use it as that. But at the same time, like there's just tough realities in life that we want to be that safety net for that person that, needs that spot. So partly it's adjusting your expectations and knowing, if you're a high school teacher and you want everybody to be reading at this level, you're going to be really disappointed. So you do your best, you structure the environment, you try to, create all of these different support networks. But at the same time, if your self-worth is based on everybody achieves the level of this top 1% of super high academic students, then, you'll always be pushing in a way that, burns yourself out and disappoints you, belittles other people, because then you're always disappointed in this person. Instead of saying, congratulations, you moved up this much, you're saying, well, I wish you were here, so you're not good enough. And so there's that mix. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what comes to mind.
No, that was good. And I have one more question. This is my last question. So what would you say the benefits are of a model that does try and fix people rather than providing them a home?
Let me make sure I'm getting so a model. Can you rephrase that? I just want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
So what would you say the benefits are of, say, a homeless shelters model that is not to necessarily like provide a home night in and night out, so it's not necessarily a shelter, but a facility that is kind of like an education station where people can come in and learn about how to get themselves out of the struggle for homelessness? What would you say the benefits are of that?
Yeah, so like my heart and like what we're doing here at the shelter would be the latter, where we have personal progress plans. And so you come in, what's your need? How do we move you forward? And how do we hopefully have it to where you're never finding yourself in homelessness again? So I would say, in my mind, that always makes the most sense to do that. But then again, like partly is the person ready, so I think there needs to be the different levels of that type of thing. So you need, a place where either if somebody's just so actively in their drug use, or there's just other things going on, or their schizophrenia is out of control, so they think the CIA is after them, so they will not stay in a building, they won't stay in a home by that. You could give them a mansion free of charge and they'll go back to the woods with their backpack the next night. So for some of that, it's like, okay, you just need a place. So ideally somebody doesn't freeze to death. And then you want like the intermediate stuff and then the high end stuff where it's like, okay, this person, they get it, they want it, they just need to learn the plumbing skill because there's a ton of plumbing jobs and they'll make $50 an hour, so there's the different levels. And I think partly when there's the national top-down approach, it's assuming everybody's ready, wants it, and wants to learn a trade. But it's like, we've got, Michigan Works in Jackson, that's like state and federally funded, and that's what they do. And I get an email every week that there's 1,550 jobs just in Jackson County right now. Most of them need no training. Some of them will come and pick you up and bring you to work. They'll start at $15 an hour. And there's tons of job training programs. There's the College and Career Access Center that's made for folks that are, kind of from these demographics where they're not some middle-class family that everybody in their family's just gone to college, where that helps them to know, how do I move forward? Do I need my GED first? And then you through all that stuff. Is there if it's a single mom with 4 kids, okay, how do I get my GED? Okay, needs to be childcare. And so now there's vouchers to help you get free childcare. So all that exists in Jackson right now. And so partly it's working within those systems. So then those that are ready for that, there's probably already the things in place through College and Career Access, through Michigan Works, that actually does that piece of it. So even if they're homeless, okay, while they're at the shelter, 3 blocks down the road is Michigan Works with their computer lab and people that specialize in these situations. So yeah, I would say you need all of them. Ideally, you always push people towards that wraparound service that helps them move forward. But then whether they're ready or willing to take advantage of that is up to them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Anything else? Hope I haven't bored you to death.
Yeah, I have one more question. So how do you feel that homelessness has maybe given an outlook on the city of Jackson, local businesses, just what type of impact it's had in the outlook or how people view the city?
Jackson specifically?
Yeah, Jackson specifically.
So the last year and a half's been weird because so I think COVID made everything extra weird. I think people lost their minds. They were living in their basements for a year and a half. They had tons of extra time to almost be like an armchair quarterback where you can sit and watch a sport and you're like, I would have made that catch. And you're like, nope, there's a 7-foot guy running at you that's about to, like it's not that easy, but sitting, eating a bowl of cereal, watching a football game, it seems pretty good. So you got everybody for a year and a half at home on Facebook and everything, thinking that they can solve the world's problems from their armchair kind of thing. So it's almost like all the things that maybe were there before, all of a sudden, like they notice it for the first time. So they think it's like a brand new thing and nobody's doing anything. So I think people were more aware of stuff, but a lot of weird stuff also started happening. So there were just billions and billions of dollars flowing down with zero accountability. So we started getting calls from people that like had homes and stuff. And they're like, hey, is Jackson the place that gives out the free heroin needles and that gets free hotels? And they were like coming from other communities because they could just get a hotel for 30 days, hang out, use drugs and stuff, and then leave. And so there's some that started doing that, which was a new thing that happened during COVID because there was just crazy amounts of money. And then there were seasons where downtown people would sit with signs that said, homeless, please help. And during a certain period of that, like the people that were there, we knew 100% of them and we knew all of them had homes. They were in the apartments like 2 blocks down the road from us. And so we started getting lots of stuff from the community of like, homelessness is increasing like crazy in Jackson because I see people in front of Dirty Bird restaurant. And then if you said, oh, actually, I know where they live, they're not homeless, they would almost be mad at you and say, like you're judging them. And it's like, no, I'm saying like they actually have a home. So if the sign said, I don't have much money, I want some, then that would be honest. But if it says I'm homeless, that actually isn't true. So it created, so in some instances, they said homelessness has increased, but it was very tricky, very misleading. And then at the same time, you probably know there's the eviction moratorium. So the federal government said you can't evict people from their homes. So in some ways, unless the population of a city grew, if you're not allowed to evict people, how would there actually be more homelessness while nobody can be evicted, if that makes sense? So that I would kind of ask those questions and people would just kind of like, oh, because the city of Jackson did not increase in its population. So I'll have to say like a lot of more people have become aware and passionate because I think they had more discretionary time to look into things and people are good hearted. So there's, they're getting stimulus money and they're saying, hey, I have more money than I've ever had and I haven't been working and I haven't had to pay for gas or childcare. And should I donate to good organizations? Should I help solve homelessness? Should I weigh in on the issue? So it's good intention, good hearted things. And there's for sure real issues happening and goofy stuff and everybody's story is different. So I'm not even saying everybody's faking, but I know 100% during certain seasons, some goofy stuff was happening that created a misrepresentation of what homelessness really was. And again, I think it was just a lot of weird factors that COVID put gas on a lot of weird things. And And there was a lot of emotionally driven things. And so instead of pausing and asking questions, I see someone with a sign, what do I do? And so it was interesting. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it was weird.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
I had just one question. You spoke earlier about how homeless people dealing with mental illnesses often struggle to want to stay in the shelter. So what are other ways that we can support the homeless that do suffer from those things?
Yeah, so like the TTI organization that we partner with really well, like I said, so they'll go to people, whether it's under the bridge or in the woods or wherever they are, or downtown sitting on the street, so they'll still like kind of start signing them up for supportive housing. So, they'd be welcome to come stay at the shelter until their housing stuff's figured out, or if they decide I want to sleep in the woods until I have an apartment, that's up to them. But those services can start right then. If food's a thing, then they would probably get food brought to them. We actually have a bunch of these sleeping bag coats. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're awesome. They're these huge heavy duty winter coats that look pretty normal, but then inside of it folds up and it folds it into a sleeping bag. So you can actually sleep in it. It's got a hoodie, so it's almost like a mummy bag. And so you can either carry it over your shoulder, it's got a handle like a bag, or you can wear it like a winter coat when you're not sleeping in it and it looks like just a nice, cool coat. So we'll actually give a lot of those to this organization. So again, if people are choosing to be out, it's, hey, take a dozen of these coats and hand them out to those that need it. And again, bring them here if they want to come, because that's why we're here. But yeah, for the small subset of people that either can't or won't, or have, put others in danger, so unfortunately they can't come, those are some ways that they're still getting services and cared for, while they're still outside.
Thank you.
And I don't, if you're interested in this stuff beyond your assignment, feel free to reach out anytime, whether it's, ask questions, swing by and volunteer, or just, come hang out. And then we actually did just start a podcast, and a lot of it was because, a lot of the questions you're asking, it's questions that the community has, and especially like during COVID, like I said, a lot of people got more interested and have lots of questions. And so I originally was a school teacher, like when I first got to college. So I love teaching. I love sharing information. I love helping people to, if they have a passion for something, helping to process so that they can live out that passion better. And so really the whole point of the podcast is just, I interview either like staff that are at the shelter or people at other organizations. So my first interview was with a guy that does the street homeless outreach for that TTI organization. So we have a 30-minute conversation, and he shares specifically, some of the answers to your questions. Another one that I did was with the executive director for Habitat for Humanity. And so we kind of talk about that continuum from being on the street to being in a Habitat house. How does that work? So she unpacks some of that stuff. So we're going to keep doing these and showing that, with homelessness, the homeless shelter is obviously a part of that equation, but we're part of the bigger pie of the whole problem. So again, like if this is something that you're more interested in too, every probably couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks, we'll release those that have different conversations about the issue.
I know a couple of you had asked about volunteering here at the shelter, opportunities for that, coming to talk with clients, things like that. If that's something you and your group are interested in, our website, interfaithshelter.com/volunteer, you can sign up right there. Really the best way to engage with folks, I think, is going to be our meal service volunteering. A couple of you can serve the meal while others are just eating dinner with folks here and having conversation and things like that. So whether it's for this project or beyond, like we're always happy to have you guys here. And if there's anything else you need, if there's other questions that come up or whatnot, feel free to reach out. If we've got the time, we'd be happy to send back emails with info on anything that wasn't caught during this conversation. All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time.
Thanks for what you're doing, wanting to learn, share truth, all of that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty. Have a good day.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.